They believe some of the killers are still out there, and they say they will not rest until justice is done. Justice in the names of Chase, Colton, and all of the victims of Oklahoma City.
And this is their room. It's just like it was the day they left for school. I haven't changed anything. And these were the little shirts they'd slept in the night before. I put them in that bag to try to keep their little smell on them.
A grandmother's pain.
You don't know what grief and pain is till you take your kid down to pick out a casket.
Holy cow. About a third of the building has been blown away.
A tragic moment frozen in time.
No! Get him back! Get him back!
Among the dead, 3-year-old Chase and 2-year-old Colton Smith, leaving behind 2 devastated grandparents and a heartbroken mother, Edie.
Edie just crumbled. You know, my babies. As a mother, it was really hard because your kid tells you your problems and you fix them. You always can fix them. And I found myself lying to Edie. I knew it wasn't all right, but I said, it'll be all right, it'll be all right. We'll find them. And I knew we wouldn't go find them.
For many, the arrests of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols meant this brutal crime was close to being solved. But for Edie's parents, Kathy and Glenn Wilburn, it was just the beginning. So many questions to be answered.
We owe it to those children. You know, those children trusted us to keep them safe. We thought we were doing the right thing. We took them to daycare to be protected and to care for, not to be blown up. The 168 people that died there deserve to know the truth. Their families do, and we're not being given the truth.
Kathy and Glenn Wilburn needed to know whatever happened to John Doe number 2, once the focus of a national manhunt.
We wanted the truth. We don't want to just be rumor mongers. And so we started checking down leads as we heard things.
The Wilburns began their own investigation. Glenn even left his accounting job.
Suddenly, everything that had ever been important to him my whole life, it didn't really matter anymore. You know, you lose a lot of interest in day-to-day stuff.
They taped dozens of witnesses, people who say they saw Timothy McVeigh on the day of the bombing, getting answers from people who didn't want to talk.
I don't want my name going beyond you or my story comments going beyond you because I absolutely will deny it if the papers get a hold of it.
We're not crusaders. You know, that's not what our calling in life. But people need to be arrested and held accountable for this.
So, what do Kathy and Glenn say they found?
Tim McVeigh had anywhere from 5 to 6 other men with him downtown that morning that participated in the actual execution of the crime. That Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols did this crime by themselves. It's ludicrous.
The Wilburns accuse authorities of hiding evidence.
This was one big screw-up. It was a colossal screw-up. They thought the bombers were coming in the wee hours of the morning. They screwed it up.
They believe the government knew there would be a bombing and even had the building staked out.
The whole thing is permeated with cover-up and mistruths. It has dropped out of sight.
With all these questions, Chase and Colton's grandparents hit the road, searching for the answers.
I'd say we've got hundreds of tapes. We've driven thousands of miles, and we've talked to a lot of people.
From Oklahoma to Kansas, Colorado to Wyoming, traveling the same highways supposedly driven by Timothy McVeigh.
This is the room Tim McVeigh stayed here the night he was here.
Along the way, Kathy and Glenn were joined by Oklahoma reporter John Cash.
They have access to witnesses that other newspaper or media wouldn't have. People have a tendency to open up to a victim because they feel like that they're owed the truth.
The Wilburns talked with people who say they knew Timothy McVeigh.
This is where Tim was sitting drinking beer with John Doe number 2.
They even visited a religious compound deep in the Oklahoma hills. McVeigh reportedly phoned someone here just weeks before the bombing.
This is the church.
Sometimes Edie came along for support.
What they're doing is the most important thing I can imagine right now. You know, the truth has to be known. There's not going to be any closure till everyone is caught and everyone knows the truth.
So where's the FBI in all of this?
The FBI has this information.
They have this information.
They've talked to the same
We don't
people
know
we
anything
have.
that they don't know. They know everything that we know. They know a lot more than we do. I don't ever intend to insinuate that I'm smarter than the FBI. I know a hell lot more than what they wish that people like me knew about.
Kathy and Glenn know their search could get dangerous, but they say it doesn't matter.
We'll go to sleep at night. I'll make sure I've got a weapon close to my hands.
What's the worst thing that could happen? If I did die, I'd just go into heaven to be with the babies, so what difference would it make?
This has become their whole life. This is their whole life. And until I have kids again, this will be their life.
Sometimes it seems like yesterday, and sometimes it seems like a long time ago.
Today, back home, Kathy and Glenn refuse to give up, praying that someday they'll learn the truth.
Someone hung this up here for Chase's birthday.
Meanwhile, reminders of that terrible day are everywhere. But images of Colton and Chase keep these grandparents going.
People say, oh, but you've got your memories left. And it's like, well, we have memories, but you don't hug memories. Memories don't love you.
With me now in the studio is Chase and Colton's mother, Edie Smith. Thank you very much for coming in. It's great to meet you in person finally. Watching this tape, I'm wondering, are you concerned about your mom and your stepfather and their safety?
A little bit, but I just have to keep focused and, keep my faith in God, and I don't think anything's going to happen to them. And if it does, just like my mom said a while ago, does it really matter? Death takes on a whole new meaning when you've been through something like this.
What do you think the truth is in all of this? Do you support your parents that there are many other people involved?
Definitely, definitely. There are many other people involved. I mean, the government tries to maintain that Timothy McVeigh funded this whole thing, built the bomb, did all of this on his own, and that's absolutely untrue. And I support him every step of the way.
Does it help you in any way to grieve knowing that your mom and your stepfather are out there trying to track down what they believe to be is the truth in this bombing?
It does. Everybody deals with their grief differently, but I believe what they're doing is the right thing, and they're going to find the truth. And when they find out the truth, and everybody knows what's been going on, then we can put this all behind us. It's amazing to me to know that other parents that were taking their children to daycare that morning saw the bomb squad outside of the building hours before the bomb went off. Why didn't somebody say, hey, don't take your kids to school today? This might be a bad day. We think something might happen. Nobody bothered to tell us. Somebody made a decision not to tell anyone, not to warn anyone what was going to happen.
In watching this tape, your stepfather says, I don't know anything more than the FBI knows, yet this is not common knowledge. Do you feel that possibly the government is keeping information, that maybe you've been let down in a way that no one else ever should be?
Well, the government certainly knows everything that we know, but my parents are doing the right thing by getting the information out to the public and to the other bombing victims. Right now it appears that one of the John Does was possibly a government informant, Andy Strassmeyer. He had worked for the government on undercover cases before during sting operations, and he was seen with Tim McVeigh the few days before the bombing. Tim McVeigh called him the day before the bombing. Yet he was allowed to leave the United States and go back to Germany without ever being questioned by the FBI. And he's just one of the people that they're trying to bring to the surface. Why weren't these people talked to? What happened to John Doe number 2? Why don't you ever hear about it? If you want to catch somebody, don't you put their face on TV, call America's Most Wanted or something?
How do you not, I don't know, be so angry that I personally, I don't know how I would deal with it. I think I would be out of my mind with anger. How do you do this day to day?
Well, I could be angry tomorrow. I do get angry. I get angry all the time. Last time I was in Denver, I wanted to kill Tim McVeigh. I wanted to absolutely kill him. He was glaring at my family. Just, it was appalling to me. And I do get angry, but then I have to sit back and say, Edie, you know, just stay focused and try to hope that the truth comes out and, you know, let God take care of it.
Will you be at the trial?
As much as I can.
You know, we've profiled you on the show a couple of times, and we talked about your marriage and the fact that you were trying to have more children. Are you still trying? How you doing?
Yeah, I was supposed to go to the doctor on Friday to find out, but I didn't because it makes me too nervous. I get more nervous going to buy a pregnancy test than I do coming on national television. But I'll find out next week if I am. But we're trying really hard.
Well, God bless you. You are an inspiration. Your strength is just amazing.
Thanks.
Edie, take care. Thank you for coming in. By the way, the FBI says it can't comment on any allegations being made by the Wilburns concerning the Oklahoma City bombing because the case against bomb suspect Timothy McVeigh.
What happened to bombing suspect John Doe number 2?
We damn sure paid the price to have the right to find out the truth.
They lost 2 grandchildren in the blast, but they say they know who John Doe number 2 is. So why isn't anyone listening to them?
Yet to be set. But are there other suspects? For instance, whatever happened to that other suspect, John Doe number 2? Joe Loy reports on one couple who believe they might know who he is.
The music plays for 2 little boys who are no longer alive to hear it. Their room is just as they left it, a memorial kept by their grandmother, Kathy Wilburn.
This is the little shirts they slept in the night before. I put a bag, try to save the little snail on it.
Their names were Chase and Colton Smith. The boys were at the daycare center in the Oklahoma City Federal Building on April 19, 1995. They were 2 of the 168 innocent people who died at the hands of cowards.
I consider this the unpardonable sin. Baby killers, I can't imagine that they're granted forgiveness by anybody. And these guys are baby killers.
Glenn Wilburn is Kathy's husband. At the time of the bombing, Kathy's daughter, Edie Smith, and her 2 little boys were living with Glenn and Kathy. Like most of the victims' families, the Wilburns have a great interest in the trial of co-defendants Terry Nichols and Timothy McVeigh, who have pleaded not guilty.
I want the truth.
The Wilburns believe that Nichols and McVeigh are, in fact, guilty, but they also believe that there are others involved, and that there's much more to the story than the government has made public. In the days after the bombing, authorities released a sketch of this suspect, or John Doe number 1, which closely resembles defendant Timothy McVeigh. But what about John Doe number 2? You don't hear about him anymore, although officially the government is still searching for accomplices. You believe that John Doe number 2 may in fact be out there?
Yeah, John Doe number 2 is really number 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5. Yeah, there's another 4 to 5 men that are out there that were involved in the bombing.
Okay.
The Wilburns reached that conclusion after months of their own investigation.
This is it.
This is it.
Relentless in their quest, the Wilburns are exploring the shadowy world of the racist fringe. They work closely with journalist J.D. Cash. It was Cash who first published that 2 weeks before the bombing, Timothy McVeigh placed a telephone call to this place, Elohim City, a separatist compound in the southern Ozarks. McVeigh was reportedly trying to reach this man, Andreas Strassmeyer, a German national who returned to that country in the months after the bombing. Strassmeyer says he had met McVeigh only once for 5 minutes at a gun show 2 years before. He says he knew nothing of the bombing until he heard media reports the day it happened. But the Wilburns were tipped to take a look at one of the German's former roommates at the compound, a man they'd like to find out more about.
We learned that he had a tattoo on his upper left arm. Early reports were John Doe 2 had a tattoo on his upper left arm. This may very well be John Doe number 2.
The founder and leader of Elohim City is Robert Millar. He says the mystery man is an unlikely candidate for John Doe 2.
Some of the descriptions I have had of John Doe 2 and others that might be involved don't fit.
The Wilburns needed a picture, And after months, they found a several years old college photo of the man. Because this man has not been officially named as a suspect in any crime, Inside Edition has altered the photo. The Wilburns took the picture to Harrington, Kansas. At a local diner, owner Barbara Wittenberg says she told the FBI she saw Nichols, McVeigh, and a third man having breakfast there in the days before the bombing. What do you think?
It's very close. His neck is not as thick, but this is very close. If there was a better picture, an updated picture, I could probably tell you at that time.
And in Junction City, Kansas, the Wilburns say, a former employee of the place where the truck used in the bombing was rented says the picture could be of a man he claims to have seen with Timothy McVeigh.
I want to be able to see a current picture of him, so I can show it to these witnesses and have them tell me, well, no, that's not him. We're mistaken.
Officially, there is no comment on any of this. But federal law enforcement sources tell Inside Edition they do not at this time believe the man is linked to the bombing. The Wilburns, however, plan to keep digging into this and every other angle they can pursue on behalf of the two little boys who can't. You're not going to give up, are you?
No, they trusted us.
One more sad footnote to this story. The boy's mother, Edie Smith, and father had divorced just months before the bombing. They were reunited after the boys died and hoped to have more children. But after Edie's failure to conceive, they're again divorcing.
Coming up on Inside Edition.
Us to believe that the government knew that there was a bomb scare. The government allowed this to happen.
That's exactly what happened.
And did the bombers actually target the children? We investigate the new evidence, and that's next.
Devastating Oklahoma City bombing. Accusations that government officials ignored bomb threats that fateful morning. And even more disheartening, reports that the bombers actually targeted the children. Sylvia Villagrán reports in tonight's hard copy special investigation.
It was like entering the twilight zone. We heard the boom, 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 and you saw black billowing smoke coming up.
As searing heat touched off one car explosion after another, Kathy Wilburn and her husband made separate mad dashes from their offices to check on their grandsons at the daycare center in the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Office Building.
I was scared, real scared. And then when I came over that hill, I knew at that moment that the boys were dead because I could see the whole front of the building, and it was nothing but a pancake pile of rubble.
A year later, victims' families are left searching for the truth. Who did it? Did the government know about the plot in advance? Why were most ATF agents absent from the building that morning? And was the daycare center meant to be a human shield to protect those agents from attack? Kathy and Glenn Wilburn now say they won't give up until they've gotten the answers. They say even before the bodies of 3-year-old Chase and 2-year-old Colton were pulled from the debris, they began to suspect a cover-up.
Well, the very first day that we started having questions was on April 19th.
We have 6 to 8 eyewitnesses that see bomb squads, a bomb squad downtown, between 7:30 and 8:05.
And that would have been as much as an hour and a half before the explosion at 9:02 a.m.
You are asking us to believe that the government knew that there was a bomb scare, and yet they allowed the children to go into the daycare and they did not notify anybody. The government allowed this to happen?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Glenn's heartfelt belief is based in part on what this man, who wishes to remain anonymous, has to say. We'll call him Bill. Bill says he doesn't want to be identified to prevent retaliation against his wife, who knows ATF agents working in the building. Bill's wife was seriously injured in the blast, and Bill says when he searched for an agent to help find her, he was shocked to learn that none of the agents had gone into the office that day.
He said, they're all in debriefing right now. And I said, well, you know, are they all okay? And he said they were all tipped by their pagers not to come in this morning because of a bomb threat.
He said because of a bomb threat?
Mm-hmm.
ATF officials tell Hard Copy that's nonsense, that 3 ATF employees were in the building that morning, and all the agents were on assignment elsewhere, and they can prove it. Officials say no one was warned not to come to work that day. But despite official denials, the Wilburns continue their search for the truth. A search they admit is colored by the fact that not a single government agent had enrolled his children in the daycare center.
And of all the law enforcement agencies in that building, we weren't aware that they were in there, but not a one of them had their children in the daycare.
Was it just a coincidence? So many questions, one more shocking than the next. Were the kids, in fact, the bomber's primary target?
There's been speculation that maybe McVeigh didn't know there was children in there. He didn't know there was a daycare center. Well, it's quite the contrary. He not only knew they were there, maybe it had something to do with why they chose it.
As horrible as it may sound that anyone would target the daycare center in the Murrah building, there is one person who knows for sure that the bombing was no coincidence.
And I always felt like it was the safest center there was in Oklahoma.
Danielle Hunt was director of that daycare center up until just 3 weeks before the bombing. She says 4 months earlier, she stood face to face with a man who'd entered the center dressed in Army fatigues. A man she believes was Timothy McVeigh, pretending to be a parent, but in reality a cold-blooded predator stalking his intended victims.
He just kept asking, what kind of security do you have? And I was explaining that, he had advised to get in and that we had Federal Protective Services. And he said, do you have cameras? I said, well, no. I said, I've requested them.
It was his image caught by cameras 2 days after the bombing that confirmed that the man in the fatigues was, in fact, Timothy McVeigh.
I said, that's him. I knew instantly. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I believe he was targeting the daycare center, and I think that he wanted the children more than anything.
Why?
I think to hurt us, to hurt the government, to get back for the Waco incident.
Hard Copy has learned that the Alfred P. Murrah building had been targeted for destruction by right-wing terrorists as early as 1983. And the Wilburns say they now believe that the government may have known the building was a target and intentionally allowed the daycare center to be set up there in hopes it would act as a deterrent to attacks.
It's been said that basically it was a shield for law enforcement that was put up on 9, and the daycare centers hovered over 2. Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. They used that daycare center as a shield.
Your boys were used as a shield.
That's how a lot of people see it, and I think that's certainly possible.
For Glenn and Kathy Wilburn, a year after the loss of their grandsons, there remains 2 questions above all others. Who would want to kill these most innocent of victims? And could the government have possibly prevented them from carrying out such a horrible act?
It is a horrifying thought, the very suggestion that terrorists responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing knew about the daycare center, knew it would be filled with children, and didn't care.
Tomorrow on Hard Copy, does this man carry the secrets of the Oklahoma City bombing?
I hate the federal government with a perfect hatred.
He's the leader of a neo-Nazi militia group, and he may be the key to an international conspiracy.
If I could get a nuclear bomb, put it in my truck, I'd drive it up the Capitol building. I'd blow him at the kingdom come.
Speaking out for the first time, he's the madman of hate.
They don't know what I'm capable of doing.
In hot pursuit, cops chasing the bad guy.
Oklahoma City bombing?
I hate the federal government with a perfect hatred.
He's the leader of a neo-Nazi militia group, and he may be the key to an international conspiracy.
If I could get a nuclear bomb, put it in my truck, I'd drive it up the Capitol building. I'd blow him at the kingdom come.
Speaking out for the first time, he's the madman of hate.
Cato. If I could get a nuclear bomb, put it in my truck, I'd drive it up the Capitol building. I'd blow him at the kingdom come.
Some say he could be John Doe number 3. Tonight, he speaks for the first time. That's next.
is a man who may hold secrets to the Oklahoma City bombing, the leader of a radical militia group who admits he hates the federal government and even threatens to blow up Congress. Now he is speaking out for the first time. Sylvia Villagran has tonight's hard copy special investigation.
I hate the federal government with a perfect hatred.
This is Dennis Mahon, the leader of a racist right-wing group known by its acronym WAR, the White Aryan Resistance. Many people now investigating the Oklahoma City bombing think this former KKK leader may hold the key to exposing those responsible for the national tragedy.
They're going to try to tie me into it. They're going to try to tie me in. They're going to try to tie us into it.
Us being the radical militia types, the neo-Nazis connected to an encampment hidden in the woods 100 miles from Oklahoma City. The armed inhabitants call this place Elohim City, Hebrew for City of God.
I could be real dangerous. They don't know what I'm capable of doing.
Kathy and Glenn Wilburn want the government to investigate Mahon. They are grandparents of 2 little boys murdered in the explosion and felt compelled to investigate the bombing on their own. The Wilburns were frustrated that the government stopped looking for additional suspects, including John Doe No. 2, after the arrest of Army buddies Terry Nichols and Timothy McVeigh.
The FBI has gotten us nowhere. There's 20 to 30 people that all saw Tim McVeigh downtown before the bombing. You won't find one witness that saw Tim by himself.
The Wilburns say they find it alarming that so far federal investigators have failed to pursue leads from witnesses who say they saw McVeigh with other men that morning in 3 separate vehicles here in front of the Murrah building, including the thus far elusive John Doe No. 2. What makes you think that there is a John Doe No. 2?
Plenty of eyewitnesses have seen him.
Hoppy Heidelberg was on the grand jury that indicted Nichols and McVeigh. Although there's no evidence Nichols was in Oklahoma City the morning of the blast, there were plenty of witnesses who saw this man.
He was seen in Kingman, Arizona with McVeigh. He was seen in Kansas with McVeigh. He was seen in Oklahoma City with McVeigh.
And at least 2 witnesses describe a third unidentified suspect seen with McVeigh the morning of April 19th. David Snyder, a warehouse worker who was interviewed for an upcoming British documentary, thought the Ryder truck driving down his street was the one coming to pick up a shipment.
When they got up close to me, which I could see both men, McVeigh was sitting on the passenger side, and I'm waving at him, trying to, get their attention. He looked right at me with a scowl on his face, which I took personally, and, I made some comments towards him.
What'd you
as
say?
He was driving by.
What'd you say?
You want the real truth?
I want the truth.
I told him, you skinhead, look.
But he says the other man he saw was not John Doe 2, described by others, but someone with long, tied-back hair and a prominent chin. A description, say the Wilburns, that, except for the hair, could fit white supremacist Dennis Mahon. To search for the truth, Kathy, along with her daughter and an investigative journalist, made a dangerous 2-hour trip last month to a place where even federal agents fear to go, Elohim City.
We're driving up. You'll hear Edie say in a minute, put the camera down, put the camera down. There's a guy with a gun on, he's coming out to meet us.
According to Kathy Wilburn, Mahon stayed at Elohim City prior to the bombing. Telephone records show Timothy McVeigh called there on 2 different occasions. The last just minutes after renting the Ryder truck in Kansas. But the calls weren't made to Mahon, but rather to an associate, Andreas Strassmeyer, a German citizen and at the time a resident of Elohim City.
Andreas Strassmeyer is someone that Timothy McVeigh placed some telephone calls to while he was in Elohim City. This is his house right there.
So was Tim McVeigh part of this group?
Tim McVeigh had been to Elohim City in the period before the bombing.
Much of what the Wilburns know about the Elohim City connection, they learned from their investigation and that of an Oklahoma investigative journalist. They say Andreas Strassmeyer, who has since fled the country, is a key player. Some have suggested that Andreas Strassmeyer looks like the alleged John Doe No. 2. The Wilburns believe the reason the former resident of Elohim City was allowed to return to Germany without being questioned by the FBI is obvious. Strassmeyer may have been a government informant.
One possibility is there was informants working within the bombing group, federal informants working within that group.
Do you know how this sounds? The government knew, they had prior knowledge, and yet they let the bombing happen.
That's exactly what I'm saying. To this date, and here we are almost a year later, to my knowledge, the FBI has not interviewed Andrea Strassmeyer. I found that absolutely unbelievable.
And the Wilburns say they're just as dismayed by the fact authorities have never questioned Dennis Mahon, a man who knows more, it seems, than he's willing to tell about Andrea Strassmeyer.
Do you think Andy is John Doe number 2?
He looks like him, but he's too older. This guy's much younger.
What's Andy's last name?
I don't think I should give that. I don't even think Andy's his real name.
Well, what's the name that you know him as?
Andy.
Andy what?
That's it. I can't give you his real name.
Mahon is not so cagey when it comes to expressing his hatred. That's him in the middle of this chilling home video shot in Germany. Back here in the U.S., he doesn't wear a hood, but he still spews out hate.
Hello? This is a Jewish Defense League.
Wonderful.
Hey, Nazi. We're all gonna die. Remember the 6 million, you Nazi scum!
Yeah, it's too bad you weren't one of them. Yeah, 6 million if you survive. Yeah, okay. No wonder we got rid of you guys. Hey, I'll find out who you are, yeah, nice Jewish Defense League. You guys are terrorists. We'll find... Go to hell!
And he makes no secret that his hatred extends beyond telephone calls with Jews. Mahon despises the U.S. government and is a man capable of incredible violence.
If I could get a nuclear bomb, put it in my truck, I'd drive her up the Capitol building. I'd blow them if the kingdom come with me, too. I wouldn't care. Just to get rid of them.
Defense attorneys for Timothy McVeigh have tried to question Dennis Mahon, but so far Mahon has refused to cooperate with anyone involved in the investigation.
Tomorrow on Hard Copy, he's
Tourism on America. All right, here's a disturbing question. Did authorities know about the Oklahoma City bombing before the blast and fail to do anything about it?
Well, that's the charge now by some families of the victims. Extra has found witnesses who say they have evidence there was prior knowledge of this terrorist attack. It's an Extra exclusive. It shook the town, it shocked the nation, and it surprised the federal government. Or did it? From the moment the smoke cleared from what was the Alfred Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, stories began spreading. Could law enforcement have known about the terrorist attack that killed 168 people and failed to prevent it? A year and a half later, and still a day doesn't go by without people coming to express their sorrow here. What Oklahomans can't seem to put behind them is the question, if the government knew something, why didn't they evacuate the building? So Extra retraced the steps of several Oklahomans whose paths never crossed until April 19, 1995. This man says he saw fire trucks screaming to the building before the explosion. This man claims a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agent told him he was instructed not to come to work. And this family says the bomb squad was there long before the blast.
The government screwed up big time, and they're lying about it.
Days after Edie Smith buried her boys, Chase and Colton, she began asking people who worked in the Murrah building what they saw before the explosion. What she found were 12 eyewitnesses, all with the same story. The Oklahoma City Police Bomb Squad was searching for something.
The simple fact of the matter is you have a major bomb scare. It's just as simple as why wasn't the building evacuated?
I ask that question every day. I've talked to too many people who saw the bomb squad that morning.
Edie's persistent questioning brought her parents, Glenn and Kathy Wilburn, a late-night visit from government agents. They claim Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agents tried to persuade them the bomb squad was never there.
The ATF sent some representatives out to our house, along with a representative from the IRS, CID, and U.S. Attorney's Office.
And you know, we were shocked. I guess that's really when we first started having questions. It's like, well, what was the bomb squad doing down there?
Private investigator Claude Chris is one of those who says he saw the bomb squad there. He says he's working for prosecutors in the case against suspects Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. Claude says he saw quite a commotion downtown at 7:30 a.m., 92 minutes before the 9:02 blast.
That's when I saw the height of security. I haven't seen officers that detailed in looking for an explosive in Oklahoma City before.
Full bomb squad gear.
Yes, sir.
Claude says the bomb squad was next door to the Murrah building, searching at the federal courthouse.
They were looking very hard. They were pulling the bushes apart. They were falling to their knees, looking under bushes, looking into windows.
But the Oklahoma City Police Department tells Extra, despite those eyewitness reports, the bomb squad was not called out before the bombing. Still, Claude claims he has other proof authorities knew. When he arrived at his office at 8:58 a.m., 4 minutes before the bomb went off, Claude knew something big was up.
I'd heard a lot of sirens at that time. A lot of sirens coming from the west, approaching downtown. There was approximately 7 trucks that were traveling at a high rate of speed. When they reached the top of that hill right there, the explosion went off.
Is Claude's story true? Oklahoma City fire officials tell Extra they, quote, can't really confirm or deny that claim. Then there's this man who asked Extra to conceal his identity. He arrived on the scene at 9:10, 8 minutes after the explosion, to check on his wife. She worked in the building with several ATF agents, and one told him they were warned.
What leads you to believe they had prior knowledge?
The ATF officer telling me that they had been tipped that morning by their pagers not to come into work because of a bomb scare.
He asks why his wife, who was injured in the blast, wasn't alerted. Extra contacted ATF officials for comment. They told us we cannot respond to questions because of the ongoing investigation. So the bottom line, if law enforcement knew about a planned attack, why did they fail to act? The Wilburns have a theory. They believe federal agents had an informant who knew the bomber, so the bomb squad and fire department were summoned, ready to catch the bomber in the act. But they didn't.
Because it's a sting operation that went bust and there were operatives involved.
Operatives? Sting operations? The Wilburns think the whole thing is a conspiracy and cover-up. They want answers. Could Uncle Sam have saved their grandsons?
What do you hope to find through all this?
The truth. That's all we want, is the truth.
And there's more. The Wilburns also tell Extra the government...
Welcome to the Fifth Estate. It seems hardly a day goes by without headlines about some new and extreme right militia group, full of race hatred and resentful of organized government in the United States. But there's one such group led by a Canadian that's kept very quiet, hidden, almost unknown, right in the heartland of America. Yet the private place called Elohim City appears to have sinister connections to some very public outrages, including the Oklahoma City bombing. The company they keep includes some of the United States' most virulent and violent white supremacists and Washington haters. And because of that, more and more people are starting to ask questions about Elohim City. They called their retreat Elohim City, but you won't find it on any map. Deep in the Ozark Mountains, up an isolated dirt road in the American heartland of eastern Oklahoma, is the heavily guarded community. Outsiders are unwelcome. At first glance, it looks like a down-on-its-luck hippie commune. The spiritual leader is a grandfatherly Canadian, Robert Millar. But to his 100 followers, he preaches not about peace, but war.
We face trouble, sickness, disease, racial violence.
Their religion is Christian identity. The faithful believe Scots and other white Northern Europeans are God's chosen people. Ethnic purity is divine, but Millar denies their beliefs are racist. I didn't see a black person in your community.
No, you didn't.
How come?
Well, there's a lot of other people you didn't see either.
Any Jews here?
No.
How come?
We call ourselves racialists, not racists. We've also been called purists. We encourage them not to mix with other races.
Millar's flock also hate government. They remember how at Waco, Texas, another far-right religious community, dozens died after a botched federal raid in 1993. Elohim City is taking no chances. Local law enforcement officers say when they approached the ground several years ago to serve legal papers, they were met by teenagers with guns. Do you train your people in weaponry?
Yes, we have several people. We have one person here that's ex-Marine. He's very good at weaponry. We advise our parents not to let their children have toy guns. But when they get 13 or 14 and are responsible, then they're given safety training and trained to hunt. And most of our young people are dead shots.
Dead shots and ethnically pure. 1/3 of the people who live here are Millar's offspring. So many, in fact, the whole community calls him grandfather. Millar himself was raised in Kitchener, Ontario by a pacifist Mennonite father. Millar rejected those teachings and left Canada 45 years ago, after he had an apocalyptic vision.
It was about future events in the Western world primarily, and on this continent. I saw a time of terrible wartime destruction. Whitby in the east side of Toronto, for instance, I saw it in flames. I saw the West Coast devastated, Cape Canaveral, Houston. It was just like a movie screen going. You see these terrible things and reluctant to see it, and sort of aghast at it. That was about 1948, I think.
But these things were blowing up? Is that what you were saying, or were they?
Yes.
But today, some suggest Elohim City may be connected to a very real apocalypse. On April 19th, 1995, it was the blast heard round the world. The Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City was blown apart. 168 people killed, 19 of them young children. Within days of the bombing, the FBI arrested 27-year-old Timothy McVeigh and an Army buddy of his, Terry Nichols. But the indictment said the two men had conspired together and with others unknown. A year and a half after the bombing, the others unknown remain unknown. But a series of unexplained coincidences and events raise questions about several men, connected in one way or another, either to Elohim City, to April 19th, or to a failed 13-year-old plot to blow up the Alfred Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. The coincidences start with this man, Richard Wayne Snell, a convicted murderer executed on the same day as the Oklahoma bombing. With him the day he died was his old friend and the patriarch of Elohim City, Robert Millar. In the early 1980s, Snell was an influential player in an Arkansas militia shown here in training. The CSA, or the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, was dedicated to the violent overthrow of the American government. Its members made regular pilgrimages to Elohim City. Millar taught them about God. They taught Millar about guns. Kerry Noble was second in command in the CSA.
I loved Millar from the time I first met him. I highly respected him for years. When he first met us, the paramilitary was like a new revelation to him. They hadn't had any kind of paramilitary at Elohim City at that point, but it was something that he grabbed onto right off the bat.
Millar also befriended the leader of the CSA, Jim Ellison, who rallied his troops with anti-government speeches.
If God does not judge this nation and put the rod of correction on this nation, then he's going to have to resurrect Sodom and Gomorrah and apologize. Because this nation is guilty before God.
To punish the guilty nation, Ellison and Snell came up with several plots in 1983. One was to bomb a federal government building. Today, there's nothing left of that target, only a memorial fence honoring the dead. The CSA plot had been to blow up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, the same building that would be destroyed 13 years later.
I still look at things like this and realize how close we were, and that this could have been me having done this.
Kerry Noble, now reformed and a critic of the extreme right, speaks openly about the 1983 plot. Were you surprised when the Murrah building was blown up?
No, not a bit.
Why?
It was one of the targets that we had talked about at CSA in '83. The day it happened, as soon as I heard on the news, I said the right wing's done it. They finally took that step.
What did Ellison and Snell say about the Murrah building?
It was to them and to all of us, it was the perfect building. So many government agencies in one building, in very low security, in an area that nobody would suspect it, and that would have more of an effect on the country than if you did a building in, say, in New York City or something.
Jim Ellison, later in a sedition trial, would testify he scoped out the Murrah building and others for Snell and an associate.
Wayne Snell had made a trip to Oklahoma City, and Wayne came back and told me about different buildings that he had seen, wanted to know if I would look at them with him sometime. And Steve talked to me and gave me a description of these buildings and asked me to design a rocket launcher that could be used to destroy these buildings from a distance, fortified or heavy, large buildings.
Ellison and Snell never got their chance. On April 19, 1985, the CSA encampment was surrounded by federal agents. Millar traveled to Arkansas to support his besieged friends. They surrendered. It would not be the last time April 19th would be embraced as an historical milestone by the extreme right. Jim Ellison and the other CSA leaders were arrested. Carrie Noble served 26 months on weapons charges. Do you think, and I know this is a guess, that Snell or Ellison told Mr. Millar about the early plans to blow up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City?
I think Ellison has confided everything to Millar, so Millar would have known.
In fact, Jim Ellison became part of Millar's family. Shortly after the Oklahoma bombing, he moved from Florida to Elohim City and married one of Millar's granddaughters. We were able to get these pictures of Ellison while he was rebuilding Elohim City's church. Millar insisted we not speak to Ellison. Mr. Ellison, who was here and does not want to be filmed, plotted with Mr. Snell in 1983 to blow up the Murrah building. You know that to be true?
No, I don't know that to be true.
You never knew that?
I don't think it is true. I know about this.
Mr. Ellison admitted it under oath.
I don't think your statement, Patricia, is accurate.
And what is the inaccuracy then?
He didn't say they plotted to blow up a building. They discussed possible methodologies. Sort of makes me think of a bunch of men gathered around having beer and saying, hey, this is how you could rob a bank.
Millar developed an even closer relationship with the other bombing conspirator, Richard Snell. Snell's plans for the Murrah building were foiled by his arrest for the murder of a pawnbroker he thought was Jewish and a black state trooper.
Got out of my van, and I shot Officer Bryan twice from the hip.
In Arkansas, Snell was found guilty and condemned to death. On death row, Richard Wayne Snell was more influential than ever. He became a symbol, a kind of political prisoner to fellow extremists. From prison, he continued his campaign against the federal government, writing a newsletter and articles for militia papers. Then, in early March 1995, the state of Arkansas set Snell's execution date. Incredibly, it was April 19th, a date that would inflame both Snell and his supporters. Militia newsletters whipped up fury about Snell's execution date, connecting it to far-right flashpoints such as the Waco disaster. It was also around this time, police say, that Tim McVeigh obtained a falsified driver's license, choosing as his birth date April 19th. Former CSA leader Carrie Noble thinks McVeigh was in some way inspired by the condemned Richard Snell. Did you ever think that it was a coincidence that Tim McVeigh, if in fact he did it, chose that building?
No, I don't think it's any coincidence. When you bring that into account with the declaration of war that we made, the pressure that the older leaders of the groups are putting on the younger followers to do something in a major way before they die. No, it's no coincidence.
No coincidence.
Not my book.
How would McVeigh have known about the earlier plans for the Murrah building?
It's very feasible and likely that he would have kept in communication with certain people and said, you know, then if somebody said, well, what would you recommend as a starting place? It's very likely he could have said, well, this is what we had picked out.
Alan Abels was a senior Arkansas prison official closely associated with the Snell case. If you're on death row, are you allowed to send mail out to whomever you choose?
Absolutely.
Is it monitored? Is it read by anybody?
No. We don't censor the mail at all.
Is it possible, in your view, that a conspiracy could have been plotted through the mail between Mr. Snell and someone else?
Oh, I think so.
Elohim City's Robert Millar visited Snell frequently in prison. Millar's name is on the approved visitors list as Snell's spiritual advisor. But if Millar knows or suspects about any connections between Snell and McVeigh, he isn't saying. Is it possible that Timothy McVeigh was inspired to blow up the Murrah building by Mr. Snell's execution?
I don't know that's possible.
It is a coincidence that boggles the imagination, if in fact that's all it is.
Yes. Yes. I hope that'll come out in this trial. I hope we have a good trial, a clear trial, and I hope those things will come out into the open.
The lawyer in charge of assuring his client, Timothy McVeigh, gets a good trial is Stephen Jones.
We have suggested in court that the thought occurred to us, two things. First, that there were some people very angry at the government for executing Mr. Snell on what is to them an important day, April the 19th. And that number two, the building destroyed was the very same building that Mr. Snell, according to sworn testimony, had wanted to destroy, raising the possibility in our mind, well, did somebody decide to give the old man a going-away gift?
Do you think that Elohim City is any way either directly or indirectly involved in this case?
I don't know that I would say that Elohim City is. I think it is possible that people who may have been in and out of Elohim City may be involved. Certainly we are investigating that, but I'm not making any allegation at this time, but we are investigating it, and we've said so publicly. There are too many neat coincidences to exclude them.
The coincidences continue with evidence that Timothy McVeigh had been in the vicinity of Millar's remote community. In 1993, McVeigh got a traffic ticket on a small country road about 30 kilometers east of Elohim City. McVeigh also stayed at a motel about a half-hour's drive west of Elohim City in the fall of 1994, when the FBI alleges the bombing conspiracy began. I have to ask, has Timothy McVeigh ever been here?
As far as I know, he's never been here, and I very much doubt he's been here without my knowledge.
Could he have been here but you missed him?
It's possible.
It's possible. Whether or not McVeigh ever set foot in the 1,000 acres owned by Elohim City, he appears to have connections to some people who lived there. Just 2 weeks before the blast in Oklahoma City, Timothy McVeigh, or somebody using his credit card, made a phone call that so far no one can explain. The call was to Elohim City, and the caller asked to speak to Andy. The man the caller was apparently trying to reach was Andy Strassmeyer, Elohim City's security advisor. Strassmeyer is the son of a prominent German politician and a former German army officer. He insists he met McVeigh only once in his life, at a Tulsa gun show in 1993. The Fifth Estate tracked Strassmeyer down in Berlin.
Well, there's a chance that we exchanged business cards. I don't think I got his. As I said, I forgot about this person when I walked out of the show in Tulsa, you know, because it was just one of many people I met there. But it's possible that he remembered me and that he had a card from our church.
An embarrassed Millar first told the media no such phone call had been made.
Nobody here has any knowledge of ever talking to him.
But the phone records clearly show the call to Elohim City was made just shortly after a call to reserve the Ryder truck that was used in the Oklahoma blast. When presented with the evidence from the records, Millar changed his story.
We spent a lot of serious time saying, can anybody remember this phone call? And eventually someone said, well, I could have got a phone call where somebody asked for Andy. I don't remember just what day, but that might have been it. So we have very vague, indefinite information from our side to either disprove or prove it.
But it is a link that's worrisome.
Yes, sure.
Why did McVeigh call a man here that he claims to have met 2 years ago for 5 minutes?
That's a legitimate question, open to great speculation.
I don't know. I heard he made a lot of phone calls, and was telling people that something's going to happen. And yeah, it's possible that he was calling up people where he thought they were sympathetic.
There are other things Strassmeyer can't explain. He insists he was never in Kansas, where McVeigh lived for a time, and met McVeigh only the once. But Strassmeyer and his roommate Mike Brescia from Elohim City may have been seen far away in the small Kansas towns where McVeigh used to hang out. We spoke to several people who say they saw Strassmeyer and Brescia there. 2 women who were friends with McVeigh say they saw Strassmeyer and Brescia in McVeigh's company as far back as 1992. Even more curious, just 11 days before the Oklahoma bombing, some say they spotted the 3 men at a strip club in Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Lady Godiva's. It was Saturday night, April 8th. We showed photographs of Andreas Strassmeyer and his roommate Mike Brescia to 5 women on shift that night. They were all so frightened, they wanted to protect their identities. Okay, so what I'm asking is if any of you people who were here April 8th, and you were all here, can identify this man as being in the club on that night.
Yes.
And why do you remember him specifically?
Face.
And you?
Yes, I did.
You do remember him?
Yes, I do.
And you remember him for what reason?
His buck teeth.
His buck teeth?
Yes.
What about this man? Was he in here that night?
Yes.
How sure are you that he was in here that night?
Positive.
And why are you positive?
Because I recognize him and I remember him sitting back in a booth.
Brescia wouldn't talk to us, and Strassmeyer denies he was ever at Godiva's. But a cocktail waitress claims she remembers seeing Strassmeyer sitting next to Timothy McVeigh. One of the dancers also recognized McVeigh's photo. You saw this man in here?
Yes.
And how do you remember? What makes you remember seeing him in here that night?
From one of the girls. I just heard her say something about a couple of guys. There were a couple of weird guys. She wanted somebody to go sit with them.
A couple of weird guys?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And did she point this man out as one of the weird guys?
She said something about some guy named Terry McVeigh. That's all I heard.
So she mentioned his name to you?
Yes.
Eyewitness identification can be unreliable, and it's not illegal to be in a bar with someone who's later accused in a bombing. What makes this encounter so important is that someone in Godiva's that night was boasting about an event that hadn't happened yet, an event that would make him famous on April 19th, 1995. That boast was caught on this videotape obtained by the Fifth Estate. It's from the security camera in the club's dressing room. One of the dancers walks in to tell her friends about a customer she's been sitting with. Remember, what you're seeing was recorded 11 days before the Oklahoma blast.
He goes, I'm a very smart man. I said, you are? And he goes, yes. He goes, you're going to find a letter, and they're going to hurt you really bad. I was like, oh, really? And he goes, yes. And you're going to remember me on April of 1995. You're going to remember me for the rest of your life.
2 weeks ago, the FBI interviewed the women from Godiva's, and one of them says she may have to testify at Timothy McVeigh's trial. In the days after the strip club boast, the FBI says Timothy McVeigh was finalizing his plans. In Kansas, they allege, he picked up the Ryder truck that would carry the explosives. The bomber headed towards Oklahoma City, where on April 19th, he would meet his destiny. Meanwhile, on death row in Arkansas, Richard Snell, the man who had plans to blow up the Murrah building 13 years before, was awaiting his destiny, also on April 19th, death by lethal injection. The governor had been receiving warnings to delay, but he refused. April 19th would stand. About 2 weeks before the execution, Robert Millar warned the government about the significance of April 19th for the extreme right. Then, the condemned man began issuing warnings of his own. Prison official Alan Abels.
A few days before the execution, I began to hear things from the director, the wardens, just talk in the office that strange things were going on. Snell was talking strangely. He was, making statements that were a little scary. Catastrophic events. Things were going to happen. This date, April 19th, was going to be something that the governor would regret, perhaps.
The Fifth Estate has obtained the prison record, which gives a minute-by-minute account of Snell's final days. Snell warned April 19th would be a bad day to kill him. He even warned of a bomb. Snell's former comrade in arms, Carrie Noble. Are those the ravings of a man about to be executed, or are they the comments of a man with a plan?
I think a man with a plan. I think a man who is taking the satisfaction that his death may mean something after all, and that it may be the catalyst that puts somebody over the line to do what he himself didn't get the chance to do.
What kind of precautions did you take?
I moved my wife. I moved her aboard a federal installation to spend the day and possibly the next night, if she need be, because I didn't feel safe with her being at home.
You were that worried?
Oh, absolutely.
The Arkansas prison was on alert. For the first time in the state's history, a condemned man was moved to the execution chamber 50 kilometers away by helicopter. But the increased security precautions were in the wrong place. When the terror struck, it struck in Oklahoma City at 9:02 a.m. On April 19th, a Ryder truck parked in front of the Alfred Murrah building exploded. The building that Richard Snell had targeted back in 1983 was finally destroyed. The Snell Death Watch log notes that at 12:20 p.m., the day Snell was to die by lethal injection, the prisoner requested the TV be turned on. It records that what he watched was coverage of the Oklahoma City bombing. At 12:30, the log notes, Richard Wayne Snell smiled and chuckled.
He was...
Robert Millar was with Snell later during his final hours.
He had the same kind of feelings of empathy for the occupants of that building that I had.
Which was what on his part?
Well, what a terrible thing to have innocent men, women, and children killed.
Did he say that to you?
Yes, indeed.
When?
On the day of his execution.
He did?
He's the one that raised the subject. He said, you heard about the bombing.
He told you he was upset. Thought it was terrible.
Yes.
It's interesting, we have the Death Watch log, minute by minute.
Yes.
Which does record his reaction upon seeing the Oklahoma bombing on television in his cell. News Force special on the situation in Oklahoma. Inmate Snell watching newscast smiling and chuckling, says the Death Watch log.
Now that could be, but...
Why would he laugh at the Oklahoma bombing?
I can't answer that.
And it doesn't bother you to know now that he did chuckle when he saw it on TV? That doesn't in any way change your view of the man?
That's the way that guard recorded it. I have limited respect for some of those guards.
So he's wrong?
He may be.
But he may be right.
He may be.
Just past 9 p.m., prison spokesman Alan Abels got the call confirming Snell was dead.
Look over your shoulder. Justice is on the way. I wouldn't trade places with you.
He read Richard Wayne Snell's final words.
Hell has victory. I am at peace.
Richard Snell asked to be buried in a place where he might find peace. And it was Robert Millar who drove him there, carrying Snell's body away to lay his old friend to rest in a simple grave at Elohim City. Why would you bury such a man on this property?
We don't think that any of us are too good to accept the remains of any person, criminal or otherwise.
This guy was a bad man.
Well, I don't know how much you know about him.
Some people suggest that there has to be some connection between the Oklahoma City bombing and Elohim City. When you look at the fact that Jim Ellison, who is living here now, did plot to blow up the Murrah building in 1983. You visited Mr. Snell, who was also involved in that plot. Tim McVeigh called here, and Mr. McVeigh and Mike Brescia were allegedly hanging around in a bar together. Is this all coincidence?
Well, the Unabomber took his training in Harvard University. I think we would do our country an injustice to start a terrible investigation of implying that Harvard University of destroying the government.
But this is not Harvard. This is a small community where people hold like-minded views.
Yet, here are some people that came through that we tried to help, and if they were involved, good heavens, obviously we didn't help them as much as we could have or should have or would have.
Obviously you didn't.
Yes, if they were involved. So it's not obvious until you prove they were involved.
I think that probably Millar knew that something major was going to happen. Now, whether he knew the exact details, chances are he probably did not, because he would not want to know specific details at first. But I think he knew something major was going to happen.
Reverend Millar, your critics suggest that you sit back, you don't get involved, that you're too darn cagey to get your hands dirty.
Let me tell you something. If I knew something like that was taking place then or today, I'd do everything I could to prevent it, and if necessary, call in government agents to help stop it.
About 3 months after the bombing, Millar asked both Andy Strassmeyer and Mike Brescia to leave. Still, embarrassing coincidences continued to dog Elohim City. November 1995, Willie Lampley and his wife were arrested for plotting to bomb Jewish and anti-Klan groups. FBI affidavits said they planned to test their bombs at Elohim City. 2 months later, a gang called the Aryan Republican Army was busted, charged with robbing a dozen banks to finance white supremacist activity. 2 gang members had been residents of Elohim City. Did you also not have a connection to, there were some Aryan robbers who stayed here as well, weren't there?
That's what I heard.
That's what you heard. The Lampleys wanted to test a bomb here, they testified?
Well, that idea was pretty well exploded in court.
Yeah. Are these God's children, these people who come through here?
Oh, I think so. I think even TV reporters are God's children.
Stick with us, won't you? When we return, Francine Peltier goes on the trail of some guys who may be on your trail.
Oh, great. Just when I have to give a speech. Ultravin.
Relax. Available in 2 sizes, Magic Bag, the new way for Canadians to relieve pain and promote relaxation.
Fast relief from the pain of heartburn is why Maalox is the most trusted choice of pharmacists in Canada.
Our
powered by partnership, driven by performance. The same motto that propels this rowing team to the top is the guiding principle in dynamic mutual funds. Along with your independent financial advisor, you have a dynamic team of dedicated managers, partners, pulling together